Uh, my name is Sергій Каразій. I'm a TV producer and TV reporter for Reuters, working in Kiev bureau. I'm responsible for coverage of Ukraine and Moldova. And I'm with Reuters for 25 years. I was traveling a lot, and it happened that way that from the very beginning of my career, when I was a freelancer, I started covering a lot of war conflicts, and since 1991, my first assignment was in Vilnius, in Lithuania, in January 1991. When Soviet troops were trying to suppress the national uprisal in Lithuania, and special forces took over TV station and TV tower. And that, if you Google this event, you will see that was kind of like one of the first big events in the Soviet Union, which led to the collapse of Soviet Union. So that was my very first assignment. I came to Vilnius at approximately 6 p.m. with my colleague, cameraman. We were taken by our local friends straight to the TV tower because they had rumors that Soviet tanks are moving to TV tower. We came there and we see tanks, we see people trying to stop tanks, we see people driving their private cars straight into tanks and parking them in front of tanks, like trying to stop them from entering the television premises. So that was my very first assignment. And in that, I was covering a lot of wars. I was in Chechnya, Nagorno-Karabakh, Abkhazia, Ossetia, basically in all places in former Soviet Union. I was in Afghanistan, I was in Gaza, I was in Israel, I was in Iraq, in Libya. I was in Sirte the very day when Gaddafi was caught. So basically, I have some idea what working in war zone is and how to work there, and what kind of like skills you need. So I will appreciate if you interrupt me, if you ask questions. We can do this. It's a small group of people, so you don't really have to wait till the very end to ask if you don't understand something or if you're interested in something. English is not my native language; it's my working language. So excuse me for some like mistakes or something like this, but you always can ask. What I want to do at the beginning, I want to talk a little bit, to speak about covering this particular war conflict in Ukraine. That's something you probably are interested in. And after that, I want to talk about the journalist work in war zones, in hostile environments, like what you need to know, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, etc., etc. Okay? Okay, so let's start. So for the beginning, I have bad news for you and I have good news for you. The bad news for everybody is that world didn't become and unlikely will become a safer place to live. It's not any safer than it was 20, 30 years ago, and apparently it's getting worse. In 1999, after the end of the Kosovo conflict, we were sitting in Pristina in a restaurant with my friends who were covering this conflict, and we said that this is probably the last war conflict in Europe. The Bosnia war was over, Yugoslavia was over, and Kosovo was over. It looked like there is some kind of solution there, and we were like half seriously, half joking, talking about should we go and buy some small hotel in some resort place and just run it all together, because it looks like we all getting out of job. And then a year later, or a bit more than a year later, 9/11s happened. And after the 9/11s, we actually understand immediately that world will never be again as it was. And since that, things are getting worse and worse and worse. The good news actually is, once you understand it, once you accept it, you start preparing yourself. Once you accept the idea that you have to live in a world which is not safe, you start building your attitude, your work attitude, and basically, like everything you're doing, with this understanding. It's like people who live in Israel. When the first time I came to Israel, it was for me like quite interesting. Anybody was in Israel? Yeah. So you probably understand what I'm talking. If you go into shopping mall, you see young girls in military uniform with submachine guns walking there, like doing shopping, you know. And at the beginning, it's kind of like you can't accept it. But then sooner or later, you understand, well, that the way people are living. So for your work as a journalist, you have to be aware that sooner or later you will also need to go and to cover some war conflict. Even if you think you won't, with the amount of terrorist attacks we have, with things which were happening twice already this year in Paris, we can pray it would never happen in your hometown. But believe me, I was covering a lot of refugees. I was covering refugees camps in Macedonia in 1998. I was covering many things. And I always was going in and going out and thinking like, okay, thanks God, I'm living in a country when it will never happen. I was wrong. So I don't want to upset you, but the sooner you accept the fact it could happen in your country, in your hometown, it will be easier to cope with the situation. I know when these things started in Ukraine, I know that was the shock for everybody. It was shock for me, it was shock for my family. But I will tell you that having some idea how it works, having some idea that it could happen, made it easier for me to accept and to live through it and to work. Okay? So, now let's talk about the war in Ukraine. The war conflict in the east of Ukraine was, in my experience and in my opinion, one of the most intense and ferocious war conflicts I ever covered in Europe. On the scale of violence, on the scale of using heavy artillery, mortars, rocket systems with cluster bombs, things which you probably can't really imagine how bad they are. This war was than Bosnia war. This war is worse than anything was in Yugoslavia or anything was in Europe for last 20 years. We can compare it with the war in Chechnya, when Grozny was basically reduced to ground level by Russian planes and artillery. Or we can compare it with war in Syria now. It's smaller on scale, but the level of danger when you cover it was tremendous. I'll show you some pictures now, how it looks, and that was, the thing I will show you was filmed by a crew of Radio Free Europe, the TV crew, and that was during the ceasefire. That was last summer when it was no war. Officially, it was no war, it was a ceasefire. When we were in the east of Ukraine, we couldn't come closer to many places, like for example Debaltsevo. We couldn't come closer than 5 kilometers because of the use of heavy artillery and rocket launchers. So that was kind of like like ground which you cannot enter. I'll show you this as well. So now let's just see how ceasefire in Ukraine looks. So you can use your imagination to imagine how the proper war looked.
This is what Ukraine's ceasefire looks like in the village of Shirokina.
That's a TV crew basically under the shelling.
National Guard units are under attack again. Russian-backed separatists frequently shell these positions. The ceasefire agreement said heavy weapons were to be withdrawn. Ukrainians respond with machine guns.
Це таки боїться, коли ви. Відбувається це фігня. Коли йде злива куль, то не сильно високо.
For a while, the firing does indeed hold the attackers back. But as the assault intensifies, the Ukrainians reach for their mightiest weapon, a rocket-propelled grenade, which is not in reach of the ceasefire terms. When the shelling stops for a moment, the soldiers rush to a command post.
That you see how villages and towns look along the front line.
By shrapnel from a mortar shell. The call has already gone out for a vehicle to evacuate him, so they carry him straight outside.
Ліва стопа розірвана повністю, ну і вище коліна, задня частина, ну, задня самого. Але я думаю, що швидше всього, що йому буде стати протез на нього.
Within minutes, the ambulance arrives. He's the lucky one. Another man was killed in the attack. The lull is an opportunity to check on ammunition. Supplies are running thin.
Когда в прошлую ротацию просили, у вас пока заканчивается, подвезите, они сказали, у нас сейчас нет боевых действий. Да елки-палки, ну как нет? Я говорил, приедьте сюда, посидите, посмотрите, что здесь на самом деле происходит.
Towards evening, the shelling stops. The soldiers can inspect the damage. It was just another normal day in Shirokina.
Okay, this stuff was filmed last summer or early autumn, but apparently the situation didn't change much. So, covering the war in the east of Ukraine, what is the most, why it is so difficult? That's first of all because, why it's so difficult technically, because of the use of the weapon both sides were using. First of all, it was unprecise old Soviet weapon. Unlike United States and NATO troops using in Iraq and Afghanistan, where they have high precision bombs and rockets, which also very often miss targets. Here you rather have kind of like carpet bombing or like shelling big areas. Also, another danger is the widespread use of landmines. Landmines which were planted by both sides without proper mapping, without like people really knowing where they are. Another thing that usually if you cover in some conflict, there is one side which has more power and there is another side which has less. Here it's quite equal, and I would say rebels often have more powerful and more sophisticated weapon than government troops. So in this case, that's really like difficult to get closer to the battle when you want to cover it. This war, I would say, was one of the most uncovered wars in recent times in Europe. many locations, for example, near Mariupol in 2014, there were really like epic tank battles where you had like dozens of, well, that time it was Russian tanks and dozens of Ukrainian tanks fighting each other. We saw the aftermath. We saw how the damaged tanks were brought back. We talked to crews, and they were shocked. They were telling us things which probably, if you watched any movies about World War II, that was something like this. But nobody covered it. There was no way to get any closer to it. Of course, soldiers didn't film it, and reporters were not with them. So that just really like things which will be never seen and never reported. There is another thing which was basically very characteristic for this war, that Ukraine was not ready at all. Ukraine was not ready for the war, neither were ready reporters. I would say at the beginning of this war conflict, there were probably like 10 people, 10 reporters in Ukraine who had a decent experience of covering war zones. Also, this war, you probably heard the term hybrid war, right? Did you hear that? That this war is called hybrid war, which is not conventional war, which is not like the war when you move big troops and take some territories. This war includes elements of like propaganda preparations and information war. I don't want to be unspecific, but I guess in 2014, Russian Federation spent on the information on their media outlets abroad more than Ukraine spent for the more than Ukrainian military budget was. So we are talking about like money spent on propaganda and information versus money spent on weapon and troops and ammunition and everything. So that was I could be wrong, but that was something like $500 million or something like this. But that's better to check. I think it's you can check it in open sources. What was happening before 2014, before the war? For many years, Russia had very strong influence in Ukrainian media space. All Russian channels were basically available. None of them were blocked. Nobody was trying to block it. It was kind of like friendly nation. It was a friendly neighbor. Nobody expected what would happen. If you analyze backwards Russian news programs which were available here, you would see that everything which was shown considering Russia was very positive. It was only positive information. Everything considering like Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova was negative. There are two aspects of it. First of all, that since probably, I don't know, 2005, whatever, all Russian media is very strongly state-controlled. All Ukrainian media belongs either to tycoons or recently there are independent media. Only like 1 or 2 channels belong to the state. So whenever you were watching Ukrainian news, they were always critical towards the government, which is normal. I guess everywhere it's the same. Media is to criticize government. Media is to demand changes. Media is to demand reforms, etc., etc. Whenever you were watching Russian news, they were only positive about whatever was going on in Russia, and they were never showing real problems. So in the parts of Ukraine which were closer to Russian border and in Crimea, for the years, the image of Russia was very positive. And when basically the annexation of Crimea started, really like majority of people were willing to go Russia, thinking that, okay, our problems will be over, we'll have good wages, good salaries, good money, good financing, like that's it. It's like we're going to live in communism, like in former Soviet Union, where we had everything. Though in Soviet Union, people didn't have much. So that was part of this thing. And another thing was the very strong influence of Russian movies, Russian TV series, which were portraying like Russian police, special forces, militaries, like heroes, etc., etc., etc. And even if you look, and of course Ukrainian channels were buying it, it was very cheap, it was like send almost for free, just like show it. Nice series, well done, about cadets of military school, something like this. The main thing was, in each episode, you have dozens of shots where you had portraits of Putin on the wall, where you have Russian military insignia, where you have Russian military badges, where you have Russian military police uniform, and these were positive heroes of this movie. So basically, the idea was that every citizen, whatever, people who were watching it, when they see these people on the street coming, they should not accept them as enemies. And in some instances, it worked quite well. Surprisingly, at the end, it didn't work. But that was because reality, the harsh reality was coming to understanding people quite soon. But that's another story. So, coming back to covering this story, at the beginning, Ukraine was not prepared to it at all. Military didn't have like press officers. They didn't have structures which were ready to work with journalists, with media. So at the beginning of the war, it was very difficult to do a proper story from Ukrainian side. Not only because it was risky, not only because it was physically difficult, because militaries didn't want you to come any closer to them. They didn't want to show you anything. They often treat you as a threat, as a potential spy. They often thought like, okay, if you show something, the enemy will see it, we'll be in problems. They had no idea how to work with media. This thing was changing with time. Now it's much better. It's still not perfect, but now it's easy. But for us reporters, at the beginning of the war, it was very, very difficult. Doesn't matter for international or for local reporters. Yes, please.
When you say that you didn't have the chance to cover the Ukrainians at the beginning, did you get the chance to cover it from the Russian side?
Okay, that's the second point I'm coming to. For international media, it was possible. For Ukrainian media, only at the very beginning, it was possible to go to the opposite side and cover stories, but very soon reporters start to be arrested, detained, and kicked off, and kept as hostages for a little while. For us as international media, only also at the beginning, those who have Ukrainian passports, who lives not in the who registered, whose residence is not like Donetsk or Lugansk and occupied territories, but like Kiev, whatever, Lviv was out of question. That was like no way. So only at the very beginning we could work there. After that, crossing the front line and showing your passport mean in the best case scenario you will be immediately deported. But usually you will be detained for several days, questioned, interrogated, and then kicked off. So for us, as an international company, it was easy because we could send crews from Russia, we could send from Moscow Bureau, we could send crews from Belgrade Bureau, from Vienna, from Frankfurt, from other places. They actually quite okay with it. Except of probably US citizens. Another thing was that in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in the territories which are under rebels' control, they sent immediately from Moscow well-trained people who were organizing press services for them, who were organizing press convoys, who were organizing like media coverage, accreditation. So they sent Kremlin people to run the show, and they were running it very well. On the Ukrainian side, it was like very amateurish, very sketchy, very jumpy. So that's that's the answer for the question. So this is the second point I want to stress, which again is very bad because neither journalists, neither media people who decided, who let's say support separatists, who support rebels and stay on that side and run their local media, cannot really go on this side and properly work. I mean, there is no threat for them. There is no physical threat, but they are like, they're still not going, yeah? And of course, they won't be really welcome. They cannot really work with Ukrainian troops. It's out of question, though they can come to Kyiv and do some other stuff, but they're not coming. And there is no way for Ukrainian journalists of Ukrainian TV channels, whatever, magazines, to go on that side and do proper reporting. The only thing they can rely on international agency like us and some foreign media. And that means that it's pushing even more backward than any possibility of communication and relations through the media.
You mentioned that the Ukrainian reporters weren't ready or prepared for the war.
Mm-hmm.
How can you prepare for a war?
We'll come to this point in the second part of this. Yeah. Okay. So that's basically we are talking now about the difficulties, yeah, of the coverage. What is important for everybody, especially like also, yeah. Another thing was, and that's very usual for any conflict, that it's much easier to work with rebels than to work with government forces. That's basically the situation in every country. That was in Kosovo. It was much easier to work with UÇK, with Kosovo Liberation Army, than with Serbian troops. In Chechnya, it was much easier to work with Chechen rebels than with Russian troops. So that's because official troops, they are more like, how to say, limited, but what they can let you do, where they can take you, they have some routine, some procedure which has to be followed. With rebels, it's like, well, you with us, you support us? If you say, yeah, kind of like sympathetic, okay, go. So, and you can go as far as you have guts to go. In Chechnya, in Grozny, in 1994, we have to stop us at some point because they're saying like, okay, do you want to go with us? We're going to ambush now Russian NPC and kill them all. No problem. Let's go. So at some point you have to say like, no, I don't want to go that far, okay? Because it's dangerous and because also I don't want to be the reason of you killing people in front of camera because you have camera and you want to show how cool you are. So that's how to work and how it works. And at the beginning of this war, the coverage from the rebel side, even on international media, I'm not talking about Russian media, and international media was dominating. And that was one of the problems of the coverage for Ukrainian side, for Ukrainian officials. What you have to know, what we have to observe when we cover the conflict, and what is quite difficult, especially for local media. First, to be objective and balanced. In case of Ukrainian media, you cannot be, they cannot be 100% balanced and 100% objective. Because like if you look at the situation from the very beginning, it's Russia which launched the war against Ukraine. So like, can you really be absolutely detached from this situation? Like, I doubt it, but you have to try. The second thing, you have to be careful with propaganda on both sides. You have to be careful what you put in your reports. A lot of things which people tell you, it's not really how it is. A lot of things which you will be like given to report will be dangerous because that will be like they want to use it just like to move this news forward. Third thing, you have to be very careful using social media. At the beginning and later on especially, when there were not enough of professional footage, people were surfing YouTube, were surfing social media and looking for footage from the scene. At the very beginning, there was quite a lot of this footage. Some footage was genuine, some footage was not. We had instances, for example, in 2014, when rebel news channels on YouTube were putting videos of, for example, Ukrainian Mi-8 helicopter shot by rebels. And that was picked by Ukrainian TV stations who didn't manage to verify footage. And once we set the link to this footage to our London office, one of the desk producers in London immediately sent me a message saying, no way, this footage was shot last year in Syria. I remember I was processing it. So that you have to be very careful. In Reuters, we have a rule. We need to get permission to use video. Even if video was shot by rebels, even if video was shot by serial killer or whoever asshole, you need his permission because he has rights to this video. Very often, we cannot use this video or this photo because person don't want to give us permission, or we cannot find the person who posted the first. But in this case, you are avoiding a very serious danger and a very serious risk to put a fake video or footage. And once, you know what's happening, once you put it out, as for example, Associated Press or Reuters or DPA or whatever, France Press material, you're legalizing it. As long as it's on the internet from some, like whatever, rebel force channel, it's not really like, how to say, trustable source. As soon as you put it with the label, basically, as soon as you put it on your media outlet channel, then it's like, okay, Reuters reported. Nobody will really look further who originally put it. So what we do, we asking for permission from the in email, from the person who says, yes, it's my video, it's shot by me, and you can use it. In this case, we can verify, we have rights to use it, first of all, and we can verify when it was shot, where it was shot, by whom it was shot. And this, but as I said at the beginning, everybody was hungry on footage, on pictures from there. A lot of Ukrainian channels was basically like easily walking into the trap and just putting all these fakes on Ukrainian channels, which created additional panic, which created additional tension in society, and etc., etc., etc. So you have to be careful with this.
What if the person you assume owns the rights to this video
lies to you? Well, there are other tools to check it, okay? But at least in this instance, well, you have the person who takes some responsibility. Yeah, there is a possibility, but at least you cannot just steal video in YouTube and put it. So that's, and if person lies, okay, with some experience, you can understand that person is not really the person who put it. You can ask some questions. If you see that answers are dodgy, you start doing double checks and triple. So basically it works. Yes, there is danger everywhere, but you have to be very cautious with this, and there is one rule which is very important for us, and I guess it should be very important for you. It's accuracy versus speed. We all, especially in internet age, where everybody wants to have it on their website first, clicks and likes and shares and we want to be first. We always wanted to be first. I would tell you that if we have our local internal, like how to say, communications, yeah, we are checking our speed versus our competitors, and like 8 minutes, 6 minutes ahead, it counts. But the accuracy is priority, because once you screwed once you screwed twice, the trust to your brand name, to your media, is going down, 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 down. So you should be very careful. Yeah.
You talk about passively using media, picking up material, but how do you deal with actively using it as a journalist? Does everything you cover own Reuters and you only publish on the official sites and channels?
Okay.
How do you deal with, you know, many journalists have their own Facebook site.
Okay. So basically, what we do, we have like news-wise, we have three major branches. We have text, we have TV, and we have photo. These are all paid services, which Reuters selling, the same as with Associated Press, France Press, DPA, all agencies. We are selling it to newspapers, we are selling it to media, to TV channels, right? So like 90% of material we have there is produced by our crews, our photographers, our reporters, and that's a material which we trust 100% because it's our product. There maybe not 19, I don't know, maybe 80, but also we do what we call up picks. We take some stuff because nowadays every person is a photographer or videographer. Everybody who has a has a telephone, has a camera. So there is a lot of stuff which is online, which is available, and of course, like TV crews or photographers, professional journalists couldn't be everywhere. Couldn't be when something happened at the scene. They usually arrives like half hour later, 2 hours. So basically, because we are not expecting this happens, but there are citizens who are there when it's happened. So there is thing like citizen journalism. They are filming, they are taking pictures, they are publishing it. So this amount we are taking with permission of people. Sometimes we are buying it, sometimes we are taking it for free. It depends. If somebody wants money, we can pay officially. It's not a problem. So that's how it works. But then all this material goes to our clients, and our clients use it in their news bulletins, in their websites, on their TV channels, whatever they want to do it. So that's the way agents operate. But the thing is, once we are taking stuff from internet, we are clearing it copyright-wise for clients, and we are checking it. So when they are using it, they already can be certain that they are using something decent. And they don't have to go through this whole process of checking and requiring rights to use it, etc., etc.
But are you allowed, I don't know, if you have a Facebook page and you are at some country and choosing, I don't know, photos by yourself, do you post something on social media?
Not everything,
or
something.
Do you give everything to
No, something. Yeah, I mean, yes, but I will not post it ahead of it will be released on our official network, right? I will not publish something. Well, the first thing, I will not publish anything ahead of it. I will publish some teaser. I will publish some like low resolution photo, like marking, yes, we are here, and like already people who follow me know, okay, so we can expect some material, but I definitely won't publish something which we are selling to our clients. That's of course not. And yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing is that coming back to Ukrainian war, again, as we remember, that was war Russia launched against Ukraine, and it was like well prepared, and it was well organized, and media information was part of it. So that was actually the first time I came across the fact when official media, now we are not talking about people posting fakes on internet, when Russian official media was manipulating with information. That was Mariupol. Mariupol, it's a big industrial town and a port city in the east of Ukraine, in the Donetsk region. And in 2014, in September, it was a big push by rebels supported by Russian troops to take Mariupol. They stopped on the outskirts of the city. They didn't manage to get through. They didn't manage to take it. That was like 500,000 big, 500,000 people roughly living there. Big industrial city with big steel mills, chemical plants. So in case if it was a proper war there, that would be a disaster. It would be ecological disaster, it would be economical disaster, it would be huge humanitarian disaster with like hundreds of thousands of refugees. We have in Ukraine 1.5 million internally displaced people. While Europe struggling with refugees from Syria, Ukraine already have 1.5 million refugees. Okay, these are Ukrainians, but they have the same problem. They have no place to stay, they have no jobs, they have nothing. They didn't go to Europe, they stay in Ukraine. 1.5 million, you should remember this. So if they took over Mariupol, it would be probably another 300,000 or something. And I was there with my colleagues, we were covering this place, and all of a sudden it was kind of panic, and it was in Ukrainian media, it wasn't yet in international media, but we started getting calls like Russian, I don't remember, was it RIA Novosti or Itartas or something, they reported that rebels took one of the neighborhoods of Mariupol already, and there is street fight going on in the city, which was like, that was serious. We were in one place of the city, we moved immediately to that place, nothing. But people from other parts of the city already start driving out in their private cars, because that was already panic. When I read this particular item, in the very bottom of it said, according to some rebel Cossack whatever leader, which basically they kind of like shifted responsibility for this information from them to somebody else. But that was like official media, Russian official media, which intentionally put this information just to create more panic. And what you can do in this situation? The best thing is for every media outlet to have their own reporter on the ground. If they have it, they wouldn't have to rely on somebody's reports. But that's not always happening. But another thing is that if you have now even reports from one or another side of the conflict officially, you have to double check it. Even if it's like official Ukrainian agency, official Russian agency, you have to double check it. You cannot just put it out in your website because it's a trusted like source of information. Like when there is a war, there is an information war, there are no trusted source of information from the sides of the conflicts. That has to be another rule to remember. Well, so basically, to round up this part, I should mention like one more thing, that covering war, every journalist covering all like civil conflict or the war, every journalist should understand and should observe one thing, like doctors, do not harm. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're reporting, treat it as a very serious information which can lead to somebody's death, as much as that. When you report something which creates panic, it could lead to very bad consequences. Which you report some sensitive information, it could lead to very serious consequences. If you report about some person that this person is guilty of, I don't know, torturing somebody or killing somebody, if it's not true, it can lead to revenge to this person. So there are things. It doesn't mean you shouldn't report anything, but you should think. And sometimes even if you have like really something like, oh, I have a scoop, you have to think like, well, should I put it now? Should I put it a bit later? Should I do like extra research? Or should I put it out at all? So that's the part when we are talking about like general coverage. I appreciate your questions, and after that we'll go to like technical things and like practical things of covering. Anything about? Yep.
When you say that you contact the person after he or she uploaded the video, how do you exactly contact her? Only through social media, or do you?
Yes, well, if it's on social media, you write on his Facebook page, you write on his YouTube channel, Google Plus, whatever. Sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes people do not respond to you at all. But for us, it's rule. Without permission, we cannot use anything.
Yeah, but sometimes it's hard to find like the person who originally uploaded it, like
No, you're checking it, you're going down and down, you look for the one who has like most of views of hits, who put it earlier and earlier. It's time consuming. We have like a special editor in London sitting and doing it. On the big story, we have like big breaking news, for example, like when it was really hot and big in Ukraine, we had one producer, one person in our bureau sitting just doing this job, not doing anything else, just looking, contacting, looking. But that's part of the job. That's part of the agency job. It's something which we didn't have like 5 years ago, but now it's kind of what we are doing. Okay, good. So, okay. Okay. Now, if our editor, whoever, tells us that we have an assignment and we need to go and cover some conflict, like civil conflict, armed conflict, whatever kind of conflict, what we have to do first? I would suggest, if you need to go to any place like this, first you have to ask yourself, are you ready to do it? Are you fit enough? Are you trained enough? To cover any conflict zone, any war zone, first thing which I suggest is you have to undergo at least a basic first aid training. What happened in Ukraine, and what happened in many places, what happened in Africa, what happened in Middle East, that most of people dying because there is no proper medical assistance. Soldiers, especially at the beginning, a lot of soldiers were dying from critical bleeding in the first minutes because they couldn't stop it properly, they couldn't be evacuated quickly, they couldn't be given the first aid. We had a case many years ago when, I don't remember, Australian or British cameraman died just because of the car crash in Jordan on the road to Iraq, because his colleagues couldn't give him properly first aid treatment, and he just bled to death before the ambulance came, and it came in 2 hours or something like this. So the first thing, especially covering conflict in Ukraine, you should be aware that you need to know it, because it could be a situation when it will be nobody to help you or your colleague. So that's, whenever you're going, that's a very useful skill. It's easy to find the place where you can be trained. It's usually 2 days of a training, but that will be enough to save your life and to save your colleague's life. You need to have with you basic first aid kit, and do you know what is a thing called tourniquet to stop blood? Have you ever heard of it? Okay, that's what happened in the east of Ukraine. There are a lot of injuries because of shrapnel, And that's very bad injuries. They usually cut your veins, cut your arteries, and there's a lot of bleeding. So there are things which I'll show you later. I think I have one with me. You put it and you stop your blood. After that, you're safe, and there are a couple of hours, at least 2 hours, like of safe life. For that time you can be evacuated, etc., etc. So that's one thing. The second thing, how's your health condition? If you have serious health problems like heart or epilepsy or something, you very likely shouldn't go there because it's dangerous. Or if you take some medications which you have to take on a daily basis, you have to have enough with you, you have to know this, because in these places you won't have it. Another thing is, with you, you have always carry some badge, or at least your colleagues should know your blood type and allergies you have, and other things which could be vital if you need medical treatment. We are talking about the main things, how to survive, how to be safe. Without it, you cannot do your job. You cannot report anything. You're just like, safety is first. Remember that for us, safety is priority. We do not cover story. It's fine, because it's not your last story. It's not the story of your life. It would be another one. We can lose gear. We can lose equipment. We don't care about anything except of human life, of our life and life of our colleagues. Very good if you can also undergo a training called hostile environment training. Did you ever heard of it? Okay. There are a lot of organizations in Europe which provide such kind of training. They provide it for journalists, they provide it for NGOs, they provide it for OSCE personnel, they provide it for UN personnel, and it's usually like 4 or 5 day long training course which helps you to understand what the war environment is, what kind of weapon they're using, what to do, how to hide, how to behave, etc., etc., etc. I'll briefly guide you through the things, but I just like to have understanding. I want to stress whatever I will tell you now. Don't presume that you already learned these things and now you can go because Sergey told you something. Like, no, wait. No responsibility from my side. No. I just want to show you the range of things you have to know if you want to cover war zones.
And who is organizing?
Sorry?
Who is organizing these training courses?
There are companies which do it for money. There are a lot of them. Well, not a lot of them, but like 10, 20 companies which certify to do it. And basically, you should ask if they plan to send you, your editor, whoever plan to send you to use you as a war reporter, you should ask to do this. Also, if you're a freelancer, you could look for some NGOs, for some trusts or funds, for example, like Rory Peck Foundation. There are others who can pay for your training. There were a lot of trainings organized by different NGOs and OSCE in Ukraine for Ukrainian journalists. I would say approximately 100 to 200 Ukrainian journalists were taken through these trainings for free, which were paid by some international donors. And the situation, comparing to the beginning of the war and now, situation improved really, really well. Second thing, like your preparations, you need to know where you go, okay? You need to know what climate is there, you need to know what traditions are there, you need to know what kind of country is it like Ukraine is one thing, for example, Iraq is another thing, Afghanistan is another thing, so you have to understand some cultural differences, some ideas what to do there, what not to do, how to behave. Of course, you have to do your homework, to learn the story, to understand what's going on there before you're going, not coming and trying to figure out what's going on. You have to have safety equipment. You need a body armor, you need, we are talking about covering war, right? Where they're shooting, you need body armor, flak jacket, you need helmet, you need, as I said, first aid kit, and these things, without them you cannot go. You need to have sufficient communications. If you go, for example, to the east of Ukraine, we know that the phone lines could be bad. I mean, some providers can work, some these transmitters can be destroyed. So what we do, we have phones or SIM cards of several operators, several providers. Very good to have a normal mobile phone, not a smartphone, but a mobile phone with long-lasting battery. Because usually a smartphone lives like half a day or 1 day, depending how often you are in social media, yeah, but in internet. But you have just like normal, robust mobile phone. If it's possible, it's good to have sat phone, to have something like Soraya or Inmarsat or something. I know these things are expensive, but your life is more valuable. So you need to have proper communications. Traveling to war zones, it's very important and it's very advisable to travel with a companion. It's like a scuba diving. Did anybody dive? Did anybody do scuba diving? One of the rules they teach you, you never dive alone. Well, some super duper professional divers do, but it's, you never dive alone, which means like you have a companion, you have your buddy. If something going wrong with you, she can grab you and go upstairs. That's a very important. It's one of the rules which they, for amateur divers, they must. So for journalists, it's also very advisable and it's very good, and it's actually almost must. It must. I would say it must, because once you're alone in hostile environment, in place which unfriendly, even like psychologically, one person is much easier target than a pair, than a couple. Even if it's like two women who are not physically strong or something like this, but if it's two of you, you're unlikely be the first target, the first victim. If you're alone, it's just not a good idea. Also, once you're on a story, once you're on the scene, especially if you're a young journalist, you should try to stick to some press pools, to some press people. You could identify more experienced colleagues. Not all of them would be like very happy to have tail, but you can, it's good to stay in the hotel where other media stays. You can pick up some information. You can, believe me, people who cover in wars, they are kind of like friendly and responsible, and they're willing to help. Well, there are some, but just a second. But usually, especially if, for example, your media is not my competition, I see no problem to share some information, to share some knowledge, not talking about to share some resources. So that's basically very useful. Don't try to be like sneaking around alone, thinking, oh man, I'll get an exclusive which nobody else will get, because usually everybody got the same stuff. But doing this kind of like on your own, especially without much experience, you are putting yourself into much more danger. You want to do something?
How is it with the Associated Press and Reuters? Do they work together, or is it?
Sometimes. Basically, Associated Press, our competition. But in many places, like it was in Bosnia, it was in other places, first of all, we have some rules of working in hostile environment. For example, we are not traveling at night. We are not traveling to, well, we are traveling at night, but we are not traveling in war zones at night. We are not, so basically we are not doing a lot of things which our competition is not doing also. So our competition, our job have some restrictions which don't let us to put ourselves in stupid risk, and we won't. Also, in some places, like it was in Bosnia, it was in other places, it was in Chechnya, when the situation was very dangerous, it was agreement made either on the level of chief editors or on the level of crews on the ground that we are not competing. We are covering stories, but we are not competing. We are not really, well, like we are competing in terms of how we film, how we edit, but we are not competing in terms that we are disappearing somewhere where nobody knows where we're going. We are pushing like forward, closer to frontline ourselves just to get better footage. Because we all, unfortunately, all of us who's long time in this business, been through the situation where we lost our friends, we lost our colleagues, where some of us were wounded, and when we were through a lot of crap. So basically, again, we remember that our safety of our colleagues, and our life is priority. And believe me, we can cover story quite well with these rules, because basically once you're dead, you cannot cover anything. So, or once you're injured, you're a problem for the rest of the team. So they're not working anymore. They're just saving your life. They're evacuating you. They're taking you to hospital. So it's like, so try to stay safe. Okay. On the ground. Once you arrive on the ground, one of the first things you have to do, well, first of all, you have to get proper accreditation, local like IDs or whatever. You should do this investigation, or your colleague or whoever, but let's say you should do it before you go in to the place, to the country or to the war zone. So you do something in advance. Once you receive your credentials, you can work there. Almost all places, without accreditation, without the permission of working there, you won't work. You will be stopped, you will be detained, you will be questioned, you will be sent back. So basically, if there is a question of losing one day to do a proper paperwork, lose this day, do it, because next day you will lose 2 days if you will be detained and sent back, etc., etc., etc. Second thing, coming to the location, you find the place to stay. Usually you try to stay with other journalists. Usually it's quite obvious where everybody's staying. Usually in places like this there is like one decent hotel or like 2 decent hotels, so everybody stays there. So basically you set up yourself. Second thing which I suggest you find where there is a nearest decent hospital is. I know that, for example, OSCE monitors who work in Ukraine, they have the rule that they have to be, by their vehicles, on the 1 hour long distance from the nearest decent hospital. You know what I mean? Whenever they're traveling, the range of their travel is like 1 hour drive to a hospital where you can be properly treated. So that's one of the things. Well, I can't say we always observe it, but we know at least places where to go when shit happens. And that's very important. I will show you now one video, and that was shot 1 year ago. And that was Reuters crew, which it wasn't me, it was a cameraman who just replaced me and my friend photographer and the rest of our team. And they got under the, you know what GRAD system is? It's a multiple rocket launcher. It has like, if I'm not mistaken, 40 rockets based on the truck. And they shoot it and they cover like 1 square kilometer with all the stuff. It's very dangerous. So they got under the shelling, and you will see how they operate, how they work, how it actually all was. Hold on. Okay. Sound is not very good here, but so they were filming on a crossroad, and they got under this rocket barrage. That's one of the rockets here is a gas pipeline. That's why it's so spectacularly burning. But that was like many others, okay? So they stayed for some time on the ground in some ditch. They ran away when it was quiet already, when this series of rockets stopped. They got into the car. They drove away. They've seen the car. They realized it was their media colleagues who had the wounded guy there. So they turned around, they came back. That was another crew from Ukrainian TV channel. That was another series of artillery when they stopped. You also could see they all clearly identified as media. Yeah, we will talk about this as well. Car, flak jackets, helmet. This is the guy who had bad injury, who managed to stop the blood. That's what we are talking about. They put him into the car. They drove him to the hospital they knew already about because we did all preparations when we came there. We had the phone number for the hospital. We did a TV story about the hospital. We were good friends with the chief doctor, with the chief surgeon in the hospital. So they called immediately and they said, hey, we have our wounded. Can you prepare the surgery room right now? And the guy, and they managed to save his, it was a really bad like shrapnel wound, but they managed to save his hand. So everything ended up quite well. But that's because this crew was well trained, well prepared, well organized, and did everything according to the book on the ground. The crew, which has the wounded guy, did a very big mistake. One of the rules, if there is an artillery shelling, the first thing you have to do, if there is any like ditch, any hole in the ground, any like fortification, anything which is like below the ground level, and you see that like you have a couple of seconds to run and jump there, do it. If not, you just lay flat. The thing is, whenever artillery round come to the ground, the shells, the shrapnel, it not goes like this, it goes like this. So if you like 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters high over the ground, you will likely not be injured. You can have concussion, you can have, it's all quite bad, yeah? But you won't be injured by shrapnel. What happened to this crew? The TV crew went filming, and their driver was sitting in the car. So when shelling started, the cameraman and the TV reporter immediately, instinctively, you basically will do it. They jumped somewhere in the forest and they lay there. The driver couldn't do it because he was sitting in the car listening to the music or whatever he was doing there. So the car was hit by shrapnel, and so he was. He didn't have time to get out. One of the things, if you're in the field, in the situation, in the place which likely will be shelled or shot, you have every time, just like you learn it with the time, every time you're working, you see where you can hide. For example, in this room, I get this corner is not bad. The place where you're sitting is very bad because there is a lot of glass. So whatever comes here, also glass, like when there is an explosion, glass is very dangerous. It's kind of shrapnel itself, yeah? So basically, if something happened here, I would go here and lay down. Or if, for example, whenever you are in the place which can be shot or shelled, you're just walking around, but you're talking to soldiers, you're doing interviews, whatever, but you're looking for the places. You're just like on your back vision, you look into the places where you can hide. You see a big like concrete block, you can hide behind it, it's perfect. You see a ditch in the ground, everything which is like below the ground level, jump there. Is it water there or mud there? Doesn't matter. You just jump there. And so basically it's one of the things which you have to do. So back to what we were talking. On the ground. On the ground. We just thought about this 1 hour rule, yeah, like driving to the hospital, which is very good. First, never carry weapon with you. Never carry, I know you know these things probably, but never carry weapon with you. Never get around with civilians, with people who supervise you if they carry weapon, because you're becoming a target immediately. You're becoming a target for rebels, you're becoming a target for snipers, you're becoming a target for militaries, and you're becoming basically a target for like officials to arrest you. That's very bad idea. I had questions sometimes like, why don't you carry a weapon to protect yourself? Like, no way you can protect yourself in this place. No way you can protect yourself with a weapon. You can talk your way through, you can charm people, you know, you can just be quiet, you be compliant with what they want you to do. But you're not going to use any weapon if you have against the gangs or against professional armies. It's just like nonsense. It's complete nonsense, but some people were doing that stuff. Never pick up any souvenirs, like some ammunition, well, like if it's like piece of shell, I mean like piece of metal, okay, you can do it. Everybody understands it's not really like anything. But empty cartridges, unused cartridges, whatever, bullets, anything, don't do it, because at some point, I don't know, police, somebody can arrest you for this, can ask many questions you don't want to answer. Some ammunition can be, you see it's blank, but it's just exploded, it can explode. Just like, don't be a child. Carry proper journalist ID cards with you. Get local accreditations. Anything that you can prove you are a journalist, and you can easily prove it. If you're traveling by car, and you will be traveling by car, if you're traveling by your own car, it's one thing. If you rent some, I mean like if you hire some car, make sure this car is in good driving condition, in good technical condition, that fuel tank is full, especially in places like Middle East, desert, no gas stations for 300 kilometers. Make sure if you have a driver, a taxi driver, talk to him, make sure he knows his job, like no offense, but check, is the car filled up, is everything is fine. Please ask him to check a spare tire that it exists, because these will be things which can, if you're stuck in some like gray zone with a broken car, man, just like I don't want to do it. Also, like, look for things. I know it's specific details, but if there is a possibility to hire or to have a diesel car, it's much better than petrol car, because diesel never explodes. Even if the fuel tank shoots through, diesel will never blow up. The worst thing is, I don't think you have it a lot in Austria, but in Ukraine, in the East, we have it a lot. People use gas, you know, like gas tanks inside the car, in the boot. Instead of petrol, it's cheaper. It's like, well, there are some things. They put like some gas tank there, not gasoline, but like LNG, liquid natural gas. Okay, so there's a driving bomb. These things just blow up. These things blow up sometimes by themselves. But if you come here as a reporter, a year or something, if you come, I hope in 1 year it will be no war. Yeah? It will be, but I hope it won't be. But if you come to any place and you hire a car, look at this. Ask what it is. Because if you go to the war zone, every driver will say to you like, yeah, 100 euro and we can go. Perfect car, you know, like great condition. Because there, they need money everywhere, but in that places they need money like mad. No job, no nothing. But just like look at these things. Also, when you're traveling, now I know it's kind of easier because everything is electronic, but are you using maps? You using like tourist maps? You know how to read maps? Yeah. So be very careful if you have a map, especially if you have detailed map, or like 1 kilometer map or something which you use like for hiking something. Don't put any marks on it which can look like you marked any like military position, any checkpoints, anything. Any map, and we've been through it, the map with red dots, red crosses, red lines, whatever you marked for yourself, even if you was hiking there 1 year ago, would be something which they will say you are the spy. They will take you, put behind the wall, and will start threatening to execute you right on the spot, just to make you confess that you are the spy. Something you can be through the whole lot of shit if you have like maps, or if you have some drawings. If you want to write a good story, and you need like to know, okay, Russians are here, Ukrainians are here, something, just like make some notes for yourself. Don't do it. Try to remember things, because whenever they will find a drawing with like checkpoint A, checkpoint B, you're done, believe me. What also good to have? We said it's not good to carry weapon. It's good to have, good to carry things like cigarettes, Snicker bars, chocolate, something. You know, once you come to the location, when you come to the checkpoint, start talking to people. Don't do one thing. Don't, for example, if you're TV crew, you come in and say, oh great, nice light, nice sunset, checkpoint, let's take pictures, then talk to them. Whenever you put camera and start filming them without permission, you will have troubles. Go to them, identify yourself as journalists, say like, we are from whatever, Austrian television, we want to take some pictures of you, who's in charge of the checkpoint, can we get permission? By the way, I have a cigarette, talk to them. And most likely you will get what you want. But never start filming or taking pictures or whatever before you get permission. People at the checkpoints nervous. People at the checkpoints properly, like probably had to stay on heat or cold for hours and hours. They didn't eat properly, didn't drink properly. So if you're talking about unofficial checkpoints, they're probably drunk, they're probably drugged, they're probably not very adequate. So try to assess the situation, talk to them. They don't care about your deadlines. If you have a deadline and you need to like quickly take pictures and go and send them, they have plenty of time. Their shifts are like 12 hours. They're bored, you know? They're not in a hurry. They tired, they irritated, I don't know. Some of them young soldiers are kind of like terrified but what's going on. If it's a checkpoint, and checkpoints are, or if it's like position, army position, whenever you were taken, you were allowed to come or you managed to come. If it's position which is often under the shelling, under the shooting, they shoot at, they're very nervous. If you go to the places, you would see soldiers have their safe catchers off. They just, sometimes they don't hold fingers like this on the weapon, but they have on the trigger. So really be careful. You don't have to be frightened. You have to be, your behavior has to be like calm. You could be certain of what you're doing, but you don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to push them. As soon as you start like, no, but we have time, we need to shoot or something like, they say like, fuck off. They don't need it. They don't need what you need. So if you want to achieve what you need, try to do it through the way they will appreciate it. If situation becoming nasty and you see that they're becoming aggressive, they're becoming nervous, they're very unfriendly, you'd better go. Unlikely you will get your stuff, likely you'll get into troubles. Sometimes, yes, you spend the day there, you need to take your pictures, you want to do your story, but you fail because that's the situation, that's the reality. But at the end of the day, you're safe, your gear is safe, and you can plan to do something next day. That's much better than have your camera smashed, and then have you detained, and they have you beaten up. So like always think about that. Like you try to do the maximum, but you get what you can get. That's the reality. Okay. Do we need a short break?